Major funding for this program is provided by the Caesar Kleberg Foundation for Wildlife Conservation, the Texas Committee for the Humanities, and the Mason Foundation. Additional funding by Fluor Corporation, Mitchell Energy and Development Corporation, the San Marcos Telephone Company, and Washington on the Brazos State Park Association.
For millions of years, the headwaters of the San Marcos River have existed. It is only a little river. It is neither very broad nor very deep. And as it makes its way through central Texas, it never plunges into cataracts or carves spectacular canyons. Yet the powers of the San Marcos are real. For thousands and thousands of years, people have been drawn to its banks, and the river itself is like a family heirloom that has been passed down from one culture to another. It has fallen to our culture to understand just how fragile and remarkable the river is. This is the story of our ageless infatuation with this river and of the destiny we share with it. The San Marcos is an extraordinary river, a place of great biological and archaeological significance. But this is the story as well of an ordinary river, a simple, tranquil watercourse upon which the lives of countless generations of creatures, human and otherwise, have centered.
Give me a little slack on the rope. It's got a lot of delicate stuff. All right. Here you go. You got it?
The river originates deep within the earth. These men are water quality scientists. They have descended into this central Texas cave in order to reach the water table of the Edwards Aquifer.
Bag coming through. Okay.
The vast underground filtration system that feeds thousands of springs and artesian wells.
Wow, this is just an incredible sight. Look at the clarity of this water. This is the first time I've ever seen anything like this.
Boy, it is pretty, isn't it?
It's beautiful, beautiful.
And it's just about as pure chemically, too, as it appears. There's hardly any pollution at all in it. It's as nice a water you could ever hope to have as a water supply.
Okay, well, it really looks good. Let's go ahead and get suited up and get in the water then.
The aquifer is a dark, mysterious region, as large as a country. Diving beneath the Earth's surface, these scientists will take water samples, measure the level of the water table, and explore one of the thousands of submerged limestone caverns that honeycomb the aquifer. This Texas blind salamander is only one of the many strange and elusive creatures that live in the aquifer. Its porous limestone is saturated with water that is as clear as air. This is where the San Marcos River begins. The clear subterranean water is forced upward by artesian pressure through the fractured bedrock and erupts upon the sandy river bottom. Each of these jets is a tiny individual spring. Other springs are much larger and discharge thousands of gallons of water a minute. Together, they form the headwaters of the San Marcos. The springs have never failed. The water that comes from the aquifer is a constant 72 degrees, and it is rich with minute crustaceans and other organic life. For certain kinds of salamanders and minnow-like fish, the headwaters of the San Marcos is an ideal environment. It is so ideal, in fact, that these creatures live nowhere else in the world. The upper springs support such a unique variety of aquatic life that the federal government has proclaimed it to be a critical habitat for 4 endangered species. Numerous other species, not on the endangered list, are found only in the San Marcos River. Their fate is intimately connected with the fate of the river itself, and it is uncertain how long either can endure. In 1709, the weary members of a Spanish expeditionary force happened upon the San Marcos River for the first time. The water was as clear then as it is today, and the flow from the springs was awesome. A tremendous surge that boiled and fountained above the surface of the headwaters. To those exhausted Spanish soldiers, it must have seemed like the Garden of Eden. The Spaniards named the river for St. Mark, the patron saint of orphan children. In their journals, they referred to it occasionally as El Rio de los Inocentes, the river of the innocents. For the Spanish and the Texan settlers who followed them, the river was an important economic resource. And it would not be presumptuous of us to suppose that it provided some sort of spiritual sustenance as well. Who knows for how many centuries people have come to the banks of this river to pay it homage, to sing its songs and to invoke its spirit.
On the San Marcos River. Innocent water, bathed in the moonlight, this river of innocence, singing a path through the heart of the living, sing that old refrain, born long ago, while the water was nameless, carved through clear from the spring, your voice ever changing, river of innocence. Flames on the hill, fishing boats on the water, we'll build by the river and we'll stay by its side. We'll make our beds down in the shade of the cypress, taking our rest near the sound of her radiant water. In you all reflected, river of innocence.
The river has always spoken to poets and songwriters and artisans. But many others have heard its voice as well. This is Emmy Craddock, the mayor of San Marcos.
Beautiful. It's just a jewel. And I think people now in San Marcos and elsewhere are far more conscious of the river as a vital part of this community than we've ever been. We have a constant obligation to see that this river is protected and preserved. It's not just a gem for this community, but it's a gem for the entire world because it has very unique qualities and not duplicated anywhere.
The Edwards Aquifer acts as an immense reservoir for the water that seeps into the earth throughout much of central and west Texas. The San Marcos depends for its survival on the aquifer, and management of the Edwards is becoming a major political issue on local, state, and federal levels throughout central Texas. The fate of the river now appears to be in the hands of government.
The trend is clear. Major efforts will be made to regulate groundwater, and the Edwards Aquifer will be a prime target. Agricultural interests in the Nueces Basin will be at a disadvantage in the political battles that will ensue, in that they are unorganized, outnumbered, and could have the most to lose.
In my opinion, it would be highly likely that a drought as severe as the 1955 drought, you would probably have the San Marcos Springs going dry.
It is clear to me that a loss or severe reduction in supply of Edwards water would have far-reaching effects, not only on those situated over the aquifer, but on those dependent on good quality water in the Guadalupe and the San Antonio rivers, including the estuarine system as well.
Albert, could you show me some of those traces you've been doing recently?
Sure. Like the map over here that where I've been placing the spots. I've been doing that. Easier to show you on that. Okay.
Dr. Glenn Longley, the director of the Edwards Aquifer Research and Data Center, has the job of helping people understand the aquifer and its limitations, and of recommending policies that will help protect it.
On Holland Street, and there's where I use some optical brighteners. I use 2 pounds of optical brighteners.
The Edwards Aquifer Research and Data Center was established in 1979. It provides public service in the study, understanding, and use of the aquifer. Our activities are all geared to educate as many people in the region about the workings of the aquifer as possible.
Just above where they're putting in the new recharge dam.
Well, I'll tell you what, that looks like a good place to trace. I hope we get some rain, and that'll help get your trace through.
Right now we're going to be going over the springs. You can take a look at the clear spring area.
Longley's research requires him to fly periodically over the recharge zone of the aquifer so that he can inspect it on a grand scale.
At the present time, the Edwards Aquifer provides water to well over 1 million people in this region of Texas. It's the single most important natural resource in this part of the state.
Construction, I think, has gotten well underway, and I think they'll be completed in about 2 years.
If the water level in the aquifer drops below a certain point, there will be no flow from the San Marcos Springs. And of course, the river will then dry up as well.
Now you notice the character of the river changes.
Many springs in Texas have already gone dry. Longley fears that if some sort of management is not imposed, the San Marcos Springs, the river they create, and the unique creatures that live there will disappear. It would be a mistake to think of the San Marcos as wild and unspoiled. It is essentially an urban river, a long spring run that meanders through the little central Texas college town of San Marcos and merges with the Blanco River 4 miles downstream. Longley is also an expert on the aquatic wildlife of the San Marcos River.
It's not in the best of shape, but it is alive.
Many of these creatures are very small, and an untrained observer would have trouble spotting them in the first place, much less identifying them. But the fountain darter, the San Marcos gambusia, and the San Marcos dwarf salamander are of true biological importance. The total world population of their species is right here in the San Marcos.
Some of the organisms that would indicate really nice.
If the river dried up, the loss of these organisms would be felt keenly by the scientists who have spent their careers in studying them. To the rest of us, they would probably be only a footnote to the greater loss of the river. The city has a tourist economy now, and most of the tourism is concentrated here, at the ancient headwaters where the springs still flow forth from the aquifer. Aquarina Springs is an improbable array of attractions. There is a fleet of glass-bottom boats, a fake western town, an alligator display, sky rides, and a submarine theater where patrons can watch aquamaids cavort in the clear water with a swimming pig, whose name is Ralph. It's a bizarre place, far removed from the natural world of the river, but it's strangely appealing in its relentless attempts to draw the attention of the world to the beauty of the San Marcos. Aquarina Springs depends on that water remaining beautiful, and so an odd sort of stewardship exists here. Scott McGee is the operations manager at Aquarina Springs. It is a job that suits him, since his ties to the river are ancestral and he feels responsible for its welfare.
The San Marcos River means a lot more to my family than it would for a lot of other families. I have ancestors that were here in the 1830s and 1840s. And there's been some part of my family that has lived on or near the San Marcos River for the last 150 years.
McGee is descended from one of the first Anglo settlers to build on the San Marcos. Its waters irrigated the farms of his forebears and ran their mills, and like them, he is putting the river to use.
Our basic feeling at Aquarina Springs about the river is one of coexistence. We believe that in order for us to exist, that the river has to exist in as natural a state as we can possibly keep it.
This is your last call for the next available ride. All aboard.
Thank you, Don. When y'all get finished, give me a call on those air conditioners, okay? Sure will. Thank you.
McGee started his career at Aquarina as a clown in the underwater show. Now he's an administrator, and there are plenty of divers to prune the vegetation or perform maintenance on the giant lily pads in the underwater theater. But McGee jumps into the river as often as he can. It's his element, and if he exploits it, he is careful not to defile it. His family and the river go back a long way.
Everything we do on the river, we try very hard to coexist with the river. Everything we use around the river is biodegradable. Anything we build on the river is built in such a way that it does not hamper the flow of the river. Over the years, we have realized that the flora and fauna in the San Marcos River are very unique. There are more varieties of underwater plants and underwater animals concentrated in this area that are unique to this area than in any other place in the United States. Working on the lake at nighttime, it's very easy to get distracted. There's so much to look at, and it's such a beautiful area to swim in. Sometimes it's very hard to concentrate. I'd rather resign than do anything that I think would hurt the river.
The San Marcos River is thick with aquatic vegetation. Many unusual plants thrive in the temperate water. The rarest of these plants, and the most endangered, is Texas wild rice.
the San Marcos River has gold in it.
That's 18 meters down from the last anchorage.
Dr. William Emery, a research biologist, has spent the last 26 years monitoring the few remaining stands of Texas wild rice.
The wild rice is, by chemical analysis, 4 times as good as the best wheat grown in the United States. If we could develop a crop which would grow in swamps and marshes and rivers, which would not utilize any of the existing farmland, then this would simply be additional protein, additional food.
While most species found in the San Marcos have thriving populations, the Texas wild rice is in serious trouble.
The wild rice apparently is going the way of the dinosaur. Population size when it was originally discovered was 2 miles of the upper San Marcos River. At that time, it was described as cluttering and impeding water flow. By 1957, when I first encountered it, it had disappeared from Spring Lake, and the most recent measurement carried on in August 1981, it was down to 450 meters squared, a rather dramatic decrease in the total area of vegetative dominance. Irregardless of all the other contributing factors, if the springs stop flowing, the wild rice will be doomed.
Aquarina Springs is the starting place for one of the most grueling boat races in the world, the Texas Water Safari. It is an all-out, non-stop sprint of some 400 miles that ends in the Gulf of Mexico. A San Marcos resident, Tom Goins, is a 5-time champion of the Water Safari. He is also a passionate defender of the river.
Don't believe it, I stood so long beside the wall, keep them of night. We return to see the sun. The time seems so calm as it burns the road leads on and on to a gentle way to ride. Took a wrong turn in the dark. The sea became a wall. Now in this world that you call your own, before a gentle way to ride. Gentle way to ride. Gentle way to ride. Let me ride. Let me ride. Let me ride and ride and ride. Yeah. Gentle way to ride. Let me ride. Let me ride. Let me ride and ride and ride. Yeah. Come on now. Ride and ride and ride. Yeah. Ride and ride and ride. Yeah. Ride and ride and ride. Yeah. Thank you. Gentle way to ride. All right.
So will you please welcome and give a listen to Mr. Tom Goins.
Thank you, Chase. Just wanted to make an announcement about an important thing, a thing that I know all of you would like to participate in. We're going to have a river cleanup a week from this Sunday. It'll be at noon, 12 sharp, and we're going to meet at City Park down here. We're going to supply all the canoes free of charge. Everybody enjoys the river, so we ask you to just come out and do your part to help the river out. Let's get some of the trash out of it. Thank you.
Whenever I'm picking up trash in the river, I can almost sense that somebody appreciates it. Some previous life or some future life, but somebody is bound to be watching and appreciating what I'm doing for the river. That's why I've never gotten tired of cleaning up the San Marcos River, because it's something I feel like I owe the river. So many people come here and use this river, they should realize why they're coming here. It's important that the people in the cities realize that when they kill this river, that they've cut their own throat, because this is the river that gives them life. Not just water, but it gives them life through recreation.
Goins and his wife Paula run a canoe livery outside of town. And he teaches kayaking and canoeing classes.
We have a little saying at our shop: don't push the river, it'll flow at its own pace. So when we take kayakers down the river in a class, we let the river do a little teaching here and there. Teaching people to go with the flow of the river may be the most important part of this class. When people come here to rent a canoe, they're usually in a big hurry. They've just driven in, and time is wasting. They can't get that canoe in the water fast enough. But when they finish their trip, everything's different. They've slowed down, their attitude is completely different, even after just one day on the river.
Goins knows the San Marcos from its origin to its mouth as intimately as anyone. It is his chosen place.
There's something very intriguing about running a river all the way from its headwaters to its mouth. During my first water safari, I got to see the entire San Marcos River. I was mystified by it. The water, the plant life, the whole idea of a new oasis here in central Texas. I know this river. I know the whole system, and the more I know it, the more I love it.
The river means a lot to Goins. He looks to the river for his livelihood and his day-to-day inspiration. And when his daughter was born, he considered the river to be part of her heritage.
Sometimes when I'm paddling down the river, it hits me that this is the same water that the Clovis Indians paddled in. And I feel strongly tied to the past and at the same moment tied to the future as well. Eliminate the river and you've lost that.
headwaters of the San Marcos were dammed long ago by early Texan settlers. The remnants of that dam and the lake it created still exist today. The lake is a liquid time capsule. Beneath its surface, the story of the ancient bond between mankind and the San Marcos lies buried and jumbled. Long ago, this was the River Terrace. It stood high above the clear spring pools and dense palmetto growths. Now it is underwater. And 12,000 years worth of dreams and enterprise are in the process of being sorted out and cataloged. The work proceeds in classical archaeological fashion. Grids are laid down, and within each quadrant, the mud and gravel are vacuumed or sifted away. Whenever an artifact is found, it is plotted on a site map. This is Dr. Joel Shiner, an archaeologist from Southern Methodist University in Dallas.
Oh, yeah. It's about 3,000 or 4,000 years old.
For 5 years, Shiner and his students have been combing the bottom of the lake. And in that time, they have collected hundreds of thousands of flint chips, bone fragments, and well-preserved tools and projectile points, whose high degree of craftsmanship is still apparent.
It's part of a drill.
Ah, okay.
It's flicked on both sides.
Looks very nicely worked. Finely done.
Drill a hole with it. With the ripple flaking going all the way across in beautiful parallel lines. It's paleo, but it's not as old as the Clovis Point, which has this big flute taken out from the rear. And we've got all of the...
Some of the artifacts that Shiner has found are very old indeed. And the most impressive of them are the spear points made by the peoples of the Clovis culture, who lived on this spot 12,000 years ago.
How many? 5 flakes. Now we have flaking go on that one.
It is remarkable enough to find such pieces in the first place. But what impresses Shiner is not just the presence of the Clovis points, but the care with which they seem to have been made. The flaking on these points is artful, and this attention to detail and craft tells us something about the people who made them. These are not just sharpened stones that were made solely to be thrust into the hide of a mastodon. They are works of art, and some are fashioned with such a consistent style that Shiner suspects they are the work of one person, a long-dead artist in residence.
Music or anything else, but the point is well made and far beyond the demands of necessity. In other words, it's a lot better than it has to be. So what next, young men?
Well, let's get in the water and go get them.
Back to the site and get some more material for plotting. Why don't you head upstream to keep us... It looks as though they had a permanent camp here. This is a new approach for this early in North America. My personal guess that there would be more likely between 500 and 1,500 Clovis Indians over the entire area of North America. Since these people moved around a lot, I would expect to find a lot of Clovis sites that were small, with just a few Clovis points and a lot of large bones from big animals that they had killed.
That's great. The slate as minus B22. It's an archaic point fragment dating back a couple thousand years probably.
Oh, that's excellent.
The San Marcos project is dear to Shiner's heart, but it has not been an easy task. For assistance, he has relied mostly on his archaeology students. A typical workday for Shiner, who is in his mid-60s, involves up to 10 hours underwater. During the course of the excavation, he has undergone open heart surgery and the removal of a lung, but neither operation kept him away from the river for long. He believes he is onto something, that here in the San Marcos he has found what could turn out to be the oldest continually inhabited site in North America.
My personal opinion is that this river has had a strong attraction to everyone that's come in contact with it, and I mean throughout all history. The headwaters of the San Marcos River was the most likely place to look for prehistoric civilizations.
If the people who lived here in prehistoric times had an aesthetic sense, surely they had a sense of belonging as well. What is most significant about this site is the abundance of artifacts. It indicates the San Marcos was not the temporary camp of nomadic tribes, but a permanent community, perhaps the first on the continent. For a wandering culture, this could not have been a casual decision. The river had to be abundant enough in resources and compelling enough in its loveliness to make them want to stay forever.
I have always believed that the Indians were no different from the rest of us, that they appreciated beauty just like you and I would. What I really wish to achieve here is to find out something more than just the mere eating and sleeping habits of these people. I want some human beings out of these people. I want to find out who they were, why they did things in a particular way. I want to know what was important to them, how they enjoyed life, and how they messed up their own lives, or how they made mistakes, not just the ordinary things. For me, this would be infinitely more interesting than merely saying, well, they came here and lived because there was plenty to eat. It would take a very special place for these people to settle in, a place like San Marcos, and they did settle in here. They were people just like us. They had all the capacities for wonder and awe. They questioned their existence just like we would. I think it's just human nature. I think that the need to create and the need to accept praise from other people for your work is just as important as the need for food, shelter, and clothing. Eventually, this dig may answer some of these questions. The potential is certainly here.
The Clovis Indians were the first people to settle on the San Marcos, but the remnants of other cultures have frequently surfaced in Shiner's grids. The divers have found antique coins and weapons, bits of crockery, and thousands of pop-tops from beer cans. The discoveries are like a core sample of the entire history of human interaction with the river. In our own time, that interaction is far busier, and its effects far more profound. Today, the river still plays a dominant role in the life of San Marcos. San Antonio, a city of approximately 1 million people, 50 miles south of San Marcos, draws all its water from the Edwards Aquifer, and every day its demands increase at an alarming rate.
Since the wildlife of Texas belongs to the people, what responsibility, moral or otherwise, does the city of San Antonio, as the greatest user of Edwards Aquifer water, have to maintain the San Marcos spring flow and thus these species? Well, first of all, I would say it has no obligation, moral or otherwise, or no responsibility.
There is no doubt that eventually the Edwards Aquifer will have to be regulated and or supplemented to some extent.
And finally, is San Antonio willing to limit its groundwater pumping to ensure flow into the San Marcos? Well, I certainly would not think that would be appropriate, because I happen to think that people are more important than species.
I think a real unique situation. Probably very few places in the world, if any, can you go in one dip with a small dip and they hadn't get two endangered species.
That's right, that's right. Okay, Bob, if you'd hand me my mask, I think Alan and I will go out and survey the spring, see if we can see any of the salamanders, also take some temperatures, and we might also pick up a few of those fountain darters of yours.
While you're there, survey the bass population for me.
Oh, I wish I could. I'll tell you.
A 150 years ago, the water in the aquifer came out of the ground only at natural springs. Today, thousands of wells tap into this underground reservoir. 70% of all water used in Texas comes directly from aquifers. And a large groundwater system like the Edwards is virtually unregulated.
There is no simple solution. Pumping regulations are not very popular, and many people feel like it would be an infringement on the personal rights to regulate a resource which they feel is part of their personal property rights.
Texans have always been in the habit of using groundwater as if, like the loaves and fishes of the New Testament, it would magically renew itself.
If we do not manage a large resource such as the Edwards Aquifer for the benefit of all the people in the state, then the use is going to increase to the point where we lose the natural flow from these springs, and these springs will look like Comanche Springs at Fort Stockton, a dry hole in the ground.
Water rights are a complex, emotional, and political issue. The vast majority of the people who are dependent upon the groundwater have only the vaguest idea of what an aquifer is.
I think that in the Edwards Aquifer region, you see many parallels to other parts of the world where groundwater is the major portion of the water being used. What we're doing to the Edwards Aquifer is not an isolated case. It's going on all over the world. What we do with the water is an important aspect of what's going to happen to man in the future.
In his efforts to improve public awareness of the aquifer and to provide some protection for it, Longley is working against time. Joel Shiner, meanwhile, is immersed in timelessness. He is charting an association between man and river that began in the unimaginably distant past and may end within our own lifetimes.
Nature has been very good to San Marcos. As for the influence of the river on the modern day people, I don't really feel competent to comment on that. I feel more competent in talking about the effect of the river on the Indians themselves. I think it had a profound effect on them. The modern people seem to take the river for granted. I don't think that the people in Texas know what a rare gem they have in this river.
So the San Marcos River is a critical habitat for us as well. It is not the only such place, nor in the great scheme of things is it the most important. But it is important enough. And on the banks of the San Marcos at dusk, people stand and gaze out over the river, feeling as much the rightful citizens of this place as the fish and eels and freshwater prawns that inhabit it. They're here for the simplest of reasons, because it is within our nature to come to the river's edge and look out at that pure, glimmering water. The Spanish called it the River of the Innocence. And for all our draining and damming and polluting of it, it is with innocence that we approach it. We mean it no harm. It is just that our effects are so powerful.
And I'll hang on to you. Said together we're one, and divided we're through. Ooh, divided we're through.
Our alliance as natural creatures with this river and all rivers is unquestioned. We belong to it. It is our home. And for that reason, we cannot allow our presence to diminish it. To lose the springs and the river, to have thoughtlessly dried them up, would be a loss to our essence, a severing of some deep and secret connection we retain with those faceless Clovis Indians who once lived on these banks, and with the creatures that swim or skitter about in the water. We will never meet those ancient peoples, and we may never lay eyes on the San Marcos dwarf salamander or the fountain darter, but we are bound together with them for as long as the river remains. When the river is gone, we are on our own.
Are you listening to me when I'm talking to you? Said together we're one, and divided we're through. So you hang on to me, and I'll hang on to you. Said together we're one, and divided we're through. There you go. Are you listening to me? Changing your mind when I'm talking to you. This love of yours. Said together we're one. Takes me some time. Love of yours. Said together we're one. Takes me some time. Divided we're through. Divided we're through. Yeah.
Major funding for this program was provided by the Caesar Kleberg Foundation for Wildlife Conservation, the Texas Committee for the Humanities, and the Mason Foundation. Additional funding by Fluor Corporation, Mitchell Energy and Development Corporation, the San Marcos Telephone Company, and Washington on the Brazos State Park Association.